hope everyone's been enjoying the goings on of the silly election that we've got happening at the moment. I think Morrison's just tripped on his first real big landmine today, but that's an interesting thing.
Yeah, Steve, I think the big thing that I'm noticing, I think I told you my father used to be like Australia's top election analyst, and he virtually could predict elections to the seat. And even to this day, he's very good, and we would talk about it. So I found I've developed some of his skills, and I normally am pretty accurate predicting elections and even how close they'll get. And my view is Albanese is going to win now, just simply because the fuck you vote for Morrison's too big. The only scenario I could possibly see is that, I think because Albanese is that the minor parties win so many in the independents, but they do deals with Morrison or something like that. But if I'm actually putting a bet myself financially on Labor to win, so.
Yeah, look, it's starting to look that way. But as I said last night with Grace, and I think I might even mention it here last week, is that the real people haven't started to wake up to the election yet. So because we've had 2 long weekends in a row, it's been 6 weeks, people really don't, they just haven't switched on. And people don't really switch on until pre-poll opens. Yeah. So that's 2 to 3 weeks before the election. So we're only sort of getting to that point now. So, but the media has been so biased in one way on issues that those that were paying attention would think that Albanese's, just so far ahead it's not funny. Which really isn't the case. There's still a lot of unconvicted voters out there. And those that were on the webinar last night when I actually told you there was no such thing as an undecided voter. There's just unconvicted voters because we all have a moral compass and we all know pretty much which way we lean in life and where we go in life, and that you just haven't got conviction in yourself because most people want to follow the Joneses. They don't want to jump on a sinking ship. We live in a society now where, and we discussed this last week, where everyone's got to be a winner. So people do the same thing when they vote now as well. So you get 8-10% of the population that do that right up until the end, which is a shame.
Yeah, I just have a feeling he's going to win. But in saying all that, I do agree. There's no doubt that the minor parties are going to get a lot of votes this time. I think that.
No doubt at all. The Greens will get their 8 to 10%. Palmer's doing really well in North Queensland. I was talking to a couple of guys up there that it's amazing how well he's doing. Pauline's doing quite well in southeast. When I say southeast Queensland, regional southeast Queensland. And sort of that lower central Queensland, her real stomping ground here. And Katter is doing well up in North Queensland. Northern New South Wales, the minor parties are doing well there. The Shooters, Fishers and Farmers, One Nation, UAP. So I think they're going to do better in regional seats than they are in the city. But
agree.
But it's preference. It's making sure that when you vote for a minor party that you do it in a way that it's a benefit, right? Yeah. So you can have a protest vote and then waste your vote, but have a protest vote and make sure that we have enough people that do a protest vote to the minor freedom parties so that they all get above the 4% of the vote. Because if we can get 2 or 3 of them above 4% of the vote, it drains money away from the majors that can be then used to keep these minor parties going. Yeah, and that's the big thing. So it's quite an interesting scenario. This is very much late 1930s when the UAP was originally formed. It's very similar times. Yeah. So cool. That's a nice little segue, Warren. So what are we discussing tonight?
Well, I think really the whole contingency for the election and this is what, and of course, having your plan B. And as we all know, the whole thing's an illusion anyway, really, by and large. But yeah, the official title is about the federal election and having your contingency plan, really. So I know that whichever government gets in, it's by and large, certain things will be the same no matter what, but certain things will be very different. And I think if we're doing that with a Labor government, we can rest assured that socialism, handouts, Great Reset, acceleration will start to take place. Would you agree?
100%. Just have a look. The sigh of relief in France by the socialist movement when Macron won was huge. And you even had people that would normally vote with the Le Pens of the world, but they even voted with Macron to make sure that he got in because the handouts are too great.
Yeah.
The handouts are just too great to ignore. And we're going to start seeing a lot more of that around the world. And the handouts of those that are playing the victim game are going to override those that are contributing to the sector.
That's what makes me very sober and reflective because, I mean, I've done a huge amount of study on history and, you know, been part of off-the-grid movements and learn about that. And every single country I've seen that have gone this path, Stephen, like going right through from basically Venezuela to South Africa to Argentina, it just goes the same way. Like they start doing it. People get used to the idea of ease, entitlement, not having to do an awful lot, and everything like that. And who do they target? They target that middle road people in that 80% who've got the money, small business, farms, investors. They hit them, they go after them with taxes, they go after them this, they go after them with, you know, they're not giving their fair share. Let's get the rich. Property owner taxes increasing, like what Biden's been talking about over in America. You can just see it. And it's so blueprinted and so clear, and yet people still keep kind of living in the hope that maybe it'll be different this time, but it never is.
And look, the socialists and the lefties, they never ever not tell you what they're not going to do or what they always lay it out there. This is what we're going to do. This is the plan, people. You will own nothing and be happy. You know, they lay it out for you all the time. But it's the boiling frog. I had this conversation with someone the other day and I said, Australia was the boiling frog for so long, right? And then all of a sudden, we are now the boiled frog. Right.
We're in it now. It's happened. Yeah, it really has happened.
It's now frog soup. It's happened. Australia is a socialist country. We just have this demeanour of democracy over the top of it because it doesn't matter which major party's in. They're both driving the same way. Yeah. And my comment before about Morrison's put his foot in it, and I think that could be his downfall, is that he's had a couple of people in the party come out about net zero, about saying that net zero is, you know, flexible. Well, it is. We know it is because France, Germany, right, Britain, God knows how many other people that have signed up to it, China, Russia, you know, that have all got parts. Wait, Russia doesn't, but other countries that have all signed up to it, they've all gone, you know, hang on, this war has changed everything. And Morrison turning around going, oh, no, it's not flexible, it's set in stone, goes to show you that he's no different to Labor. So it'll just be a slower slide under him because he's still got some sensible people in the party, right? But the slide's there regardless. So what we need to be doing, we need to be doing this 10, 15 elections ago was try and keep the bastards honest, which we haven't done because everyone's just got lazy. And think, oh, no, it's all good, Australia's all good. Australia's not all good. Right. No. And people need to realise that it is not good. Inflation figures out today, 5.1%. I can tell you now that everything that I've bought in the last 2 weeks has gone up more than 5.1% in a week. So inflation's a lot higher than 5.1, but the official figure today is 5.1%, up from 3.5. That's a massive jump. We haven't seen an official jump in inflation of that magnitude since probably 2008, 2009. And even then, we didn't see it twice in a row like we have now. It's gone from 2.1 to 3.5, 3.5 to 5.1. The last time that happened was the recession that we had to have under Paul Keating, right? So that is the problem that we've got, is the trend of inflation, right? The bureaucrats are always probably 12 months behind, right? And yes, we are in inflation of 15, 20, 25%. That is happening right now.
Yeah.
Right now.
Yeah, well, it's interesting what you're saying about how the frog has boiled, because we had that discussion the other week, and I had a very honest talk with my team. I said, and just a couple of days ago, I said, you just got to understand, guys, that the Australia that you knew is over. And, you know, often you can live in hope. And the people who get in trouble, like the Commander James Stockwell had, he was a POW in Vietnam and one of the only ones in his platoon who survived. And when they asked him his secret, he goes, I saw the truth and accepted it, but others wouldn't accept. He said, I knew we were in trouble. He said, all of them were living in false hope, like the US will rescue us, you watch. And he said, I knew they wouldn't rescue us. I knew it would be political, argy-bargy. He said, I knew it would take 4 to 5 years. He said, I knew I was in for a world of pain and torture. He said, I knew it was going to be that. And he said, I just accepted that. So I said, you just got to accept this. The free Australia you knew is gone. It's over. You know, we're a socialist country. We've been taken over. And not only that, but the majority of people actually do genuinely want that now. You know, people prefer their lazy ease way of life to live in their things. I've watched Mark McGowan purely through his election manoeuvring announced yesterday how we're going to lift all the mask mandates. And as I said to someone, isn't it ironic? You know, he's smashing the people with masks when there's no cases. And right now, when people are genuinely getting sick from the virus and dying, they're lifting them just before the election. And I just said, and so I said, this is what you've got going on. And most people are going, oh, great. Yeah, now we can go back to cafes and go down the pub. And I'm like, it's like, rather than grieving, I mean, I was crying the other day about it. I remember when they first brought in masks, and the thing I was so glad was I was saying to someone, I still feel, I don't live in numbed out. I mean, when masks first came to WA 15 months ago, Steve, I bawled my eyes out. Me and my son, I just cried for about 3 hours solid. I cried 2 days ago grieving the loss of our nation, and like, we're fucked. I mean, we've lost our freedom. The people have just given it away as if it's nothing. And I'm like, nah. And once I accepted that, I was like, great, you know, there's still a pathway through for the sovereign people. There's a way through. It makes our mission even more important at the Global Wealth Club to help our fellow Australians. And I think, like yesterday, I was talking with Simon Black's team, you know, in a meeting, and they said they really want to work with us, and we're going to be getting them on a podcast with us because we're teaming up, because they said it's great what you're doing because Australia's in a lot of strife. And I'm like, well, that's what we see. You know, most people in this space have been too scared to put their head up in case the governments will target them. Well, I'm like, fuck them, you know. Let's get up and, you know, help and give people that gateway to go through and find a way through this reset. And there will be a pathway through for the sovereign. And under a Labor government, as we said the other week, the positive thing is Labor will be more favourable to people like us who choose a sovereign path. Just not so good for farmers, small business and others.
And if you have a look at what both sides are doing is they're both attacking the middle class.
Yep.
Right? And a strong, prosperous society needs the middle class.
Yeah.
Without it, you don't have one, right? And that's what we've got now is we've got a diminishing middle class, but the middle class, most of them aren't awake. They can't see what's happening because, you know, they've had it so good for a long, and middle class welfare is put them under a blanket.
Yeah.
And it's really, really been hard. And I was talking to someone the other day. Where was it? Oh, no, it was just a random person at a cafe. And I was sitting there and I was with a friend of mine, and we were talking about something, and this woman went off on some tangent, and I snapped and said to her, I said, you're going off about freedoms with Ukraine, but you didn't stand up for the freedoms of Australians. You were the one saying, I said to her, I knew that you, when you were saying all this crap about, you know, oh, the masks are for the good of us, we've got to do it, oh, the police are just doing what they're doing. And then now you're sitting there saying, oh, we've got to free Ukraine with, you know, the freedom, they're losing their freedom. Hang on, why didn't you protect your backyard? You know,
Did you say that to someone in the cafe?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's awesome. What are they doing?
She was at the table. She was at the table beside me. And I couldn't do it anymore. And the poor person that I was with, he's a business partner of mine, and he just goes, "Oh God."
And what did the lady do when you said that?
She just screamed at me. So I just screamed louder. And the owner of the cafe come over, and then the owner of the cafe started supporting me. And then there was 2 or 3 of us all ganged up on this woman, and she ended up getting up and leaving. And I said to the business owner, because she didn't pay, and I said, "Oh no, I'll pay for it," And I was waiting for her to start saying, "I need my safe space. I've been triggered." Right. And it's like, I'm not putting up with this shit anymore. These people that have destroyed Australia, but they're the first ones that jump on a soapbox and say, we've got to save everyone else. No, forget everyone else. This is why, it might sound harsh, but I'm actually against aid from government. It should come from people like me and you. If we're going to give aid to other nations, like I give into the Philippines, I give into the South Pacific, that's what I do. Shouldn't come from the government, because that money should be spent inside our country for the 5,600 homeless children that are sleeping on the street tonight. That's the problem I've got with us saying, we've got to help everyone else, we've got to help everyone else. No. We're one of the richest countries in the world, and should be one of the richest countries in the world. But all the lefty losers out there that want to help everyone else and diminish us won't protect 5,600 kids that are sleeping tonight rough on the street. That's not the men, that's not the men and women. That is kids. That is people under 12-year-old. Now, that's a disgrace. We should be so absolutely, we should be whipping ourselves, giving ourselves 12 lashes for allowing this to happen. And this is the problem where we've got, and this is where all the lefties and everyone that wants this socialist world, and it's really driven by 2 things. It's driven by net zero, which is going to take all your prosperity away, and it's driven by transgender movement, which is going to destroy women and make women worthless. That's it. Get rid of those 2 things, and we can start turning the country around. But we can't do it. I'll get off my soapbox in a minute. But we can't do that until we have new people in Parliament that are going to support Australia first. And it's written in our Constitution. Our Constitution says we must be governed by the majority, right? If we're putting bills in Parliament that are for 0.04% of the population, that is not being governed by the majority. That is being governed by a minority, which is against our Constitution. These politicians that vote for these bills should be taken out and flogged. The Governor-General should not sign these bills because it's against our Constitution. But our Governor-Generals are political appointees. So this is the problem. And this is a big problem we need to get back. And I was very disappointed the other night when Clive Palmer, Campbell Newman, Paul Lane and Bob Catter were on TV. They all got the Constitution wrong. All of them.
Wow.
All in different parts, all well-meaning people. And I'm going to support every one of those people that were on stage that night. And meanwhile, when I talk to people, I always talk about Queensland because, if you see my map of Australia, there's Queensland and nothing else. So, I'm very biased when it comes to Queensland. But these are the people that we've got to support, but they've got flaws as well, as they don't understand the full consequences of the Constitution. So, And that's because we haven't fought for the Constitution since the late 50s. Actually, probably the 60s with the Aboriginal vote. That was really the last major constitutional conversation we had in this country. That's, what's that, 40, that's 60 years ago. That's 2 generations. There's 2 generations of people who have never, ever seen a constitutional fight. Right. So this is why we've got all these people wanting to get into Parliament, you know, with the God mentality. But, man, we've just got to, we've got to change it. But we've got to protect ourselves in the future, because if we can't survive going through, right, you can't then help other people. And I think I saw someone in the chat mention about the Bible. It is, you know, you've got to look after yourself first, and then you can give. Yeah. But you can do that at the same time, as long as it's measured. And that's what we've got to do. So that's why we're on here. We're on here to protect ourselves first, and then we can help the rest of the country. And that's where last week, I think, when we got away, Warren, was we were talking about the voting problem is us. We have to identify that the problem is us first, right? So if we take that for granted now, that everyone on this webinar tonight, and thank you for being here, is we've put our hand up and said, hey, we are the problem. Now we need to fix ourselves, get ourselves right, both head and everything else, right? And then now we can go and help the country.
See, I have this radical thought I've always had, Steve, which I don't think I've ever heard anyone say. In my view, it's a bit like, if you want to drive a car, you've got to prove you can drive a car. I personally don't think people should be allowed to vote in the election unless they've taken a basic test that proves they understand the system at some level, at a basic level. So you've got to go get that and get what's called a voter stamp that proves that they actually understand what they're doing. And if they don't deserve the right to vote. That would solve it, because you get the idiot votes that's doing the whole thing. My view is that you should not be allowed to vote unless you actually meet certain criteria. That's my view.
And I saw something, someone showed me something just before, and that was why I was a bit late. I was having dinner with someone, and they showed me this photo from Facebook where it said, put someone first and then everyone else second. And I just looked at that and went, that is fucking stupid. Because when I was, even though that they'd probably get away with it through the AEC, if I'm a scrutineer for a major party, which I have done, mate, I used to, everything that had a blemish on it, even if the ballot paper had a little scribble in the corner that could be confused as someone else's signature, I used to get it put aside, right? I used to get it thrown out of the count to be looked at after all the count's done. And 9 times out of 10, those votes never ever get counted, because the majority candidates already got 50% plus 1.
Yeah.
Right? So I used to make sure they get flushed out of the system. And any really good scrutineer, and any good scrutineer from a major party will do that. They will make sure anything that can be contested will be pulled out. Yeah. It doesn't matter which party either, mind you. I used to even pick up Labor Party ballots that can be contested and throw them out, and Liberal Party and the so forth and so on. Because if you can get rid of all those contested ballots, you keep all the other scrutineers looking elsewhere, so that the count can absolutely go on. And that is why we need, exactly what you said, we need to be trained. Everyone needs to be trained in how our political system works. And that is, it's poorly. It should be taught in schools. It should be taught in kindergarten. It should be taught in the home. This thing about don't talk about politics at home, I think it's really, really, really poor. I'm glad my parents we talk politics everywhere. I grew up surrounded by politics, surrounded by faith, surrounded by business.
Yeah.
Because how else do you learn?
Yeah, I was fortunate. I actually had a double influence. My uncle was a radical Joe Jelke Peterson lover, like as right-wing as you'll ever get in your life. And my dad's as left-wing as you'll ever get in your life, you know. But between the two of them, I got a pretty balanced perspective. You know, I learned to understand the left-wing perspective through my father, who, and, you know, he would have some good merit. You know, he would explain certain things for me, or to go, okay, I didn't think of that. Whereas my uncle was like you, Steve. He just was like, he was completely against welfare. He lost his marbles when Gough Whitlam got in and started giving money away. and used to literally cause all kinds of problems at family gatherings because people would start going off at him. And my uncle was, he just would say straight up, he goes, if you're an idiot in my home, you will be kicked out. I will not tolerate left-wing idiots coming into my house and speaking nonsense. He would kick people out of the house, including relatives. And to my poor old aunt's absolute, like she'd get very distressed and saying, look, just calm down. But he openly took no tolerance of that. And one of the things he always said, and I remembered that, was when he literally lost his third business and went completely broke and he was unable to meet his expenses, he didn't even think for a minute about going on welfare. He goes, why would I do that? He goes, why would I dare go to a government? He goes, it's my job, he said, under the Bible to provide for my family, not the government. So he said, so he actually went, he said, let's just go and have an adventure while we're sorting this out. So he just took them all up to Geraldton. They went crayfishing and fishing every day. They lived on fish, lived off the land, did it for 3 months. And the kids still to this day said it was one of the most fun 3 months. Then once he worked himself out, got a few odd jobs, he came back, went up to a sign writing yard and said to the guy, if I work for you for a month for free to help you out, because he saw the guy was overworked, will you teach me your trade? Guy said, done. So my uncle then started a sign writing business and made some cash and got ahead, doing pretty well. But then he noticed that someone was doing demolition and he found out they were making a fortune. And the biggest thing he noticed, and you get this is what you call seeing opportunity, but no one else is seeing. He noticed that all these beautiful lead light windows were being taken to be thrown out. And he goes, where do these go? And he goes, oh, we go to the tip. He goes, well, can I have them? And he goes, well, whatever. If you want, he said, can I dispose of them for you? He even took them down and offered a yard sale, had a queue lined up the door to buy all the lead lights secondhand and all that. He then went back to that company and said, if I work for you for your next job for free to help you out, because he heard they mentioned they were short on labour, he said, will you teach me it? So they did. He started his own demolition company. Within a year, he was the first guy in WA to introduce yard sales and he made an absolute fortune. And he ended up buying lots of land, lots of property, built his own house and left his wife with a very good legacy, and that's how he did it.
Look, architectural salvage is a massive business. I've got 2 friends of mine over in the States. They're up in New England and they've got multi-million dollar businesses. That's all based around this architectural salvage. But it's seeing that opportunity, right? And that's the thing is we most of us walk around glued to something like Twitter thinking it's the real world rather than what I like to say, tuned to Deal FM. Everywhere I'm going, I'm tuned in to try and see what the next deal is or is there an opportunity where I can help someone, because then it might be a connection that takes me to somewhere else. And that stuff was taught to me by the people that I associated with, not by school, but that should be taught in school. And that's how we survive in this world, and that's how we'll get through this whole period that we're going through now, is by being attuned to what the masses aren't. I'm naturally a contrarian. So yes. That's me naturally. I'm a creative, but I'm a contrarian. So if everyone's running that way, I'm going that way, purely and simply because the masses are normally wrong.
Yeah.
Right? And there's an old saying, a person is smart, people are dumb. And we see it all the time. When you get 2 or 3 people together, they tend to become the lowest dominator of that group. And they all tend to be quite dumb. It's quite funny. But that's where we're at. And that's why you've got to look after yourself now. Just doing simple things like if you're a sole trader, become a company. Right? That's going to protect you from a whole heap of things that could happen. Plus, I'll guarantee you'll save money on tax, because you can look at stuff differently. Because what they'll do is they'll come for the individual before they'll come for an entity.
Yeah.
Right? And an entity is not is sort of protected because that's what they're doing as well.
Yes.
Right?
Especially foundations.
Yeah, foundation. At the moment, the wealthy are moving towards foundations in a big way.
Yeah.
And we've been seeing it for the last 10 years. Right? And and that is because they understand that if it's not in my name and I'm not controlling it, and it's for charitable means or for legacy or future means, hey, no one's going to touch it, but it's still mine. I'm still part of the committee that looks after it, right? And 9 times out of 10, you'll have the controls to the bank accounts and everything else like that, because the board will give you that authority. But that's not you. And that's why that's why you need to look at what the wealthy are doing. And that I just see Matt says, so why the attack on foundation bank accounts currently?
That would be private. That would be private foundations, I'm presuming.
Yeah. That I'm assuming that's private foundations, but I'm also assuming that's also because you don't have a relationship with your bank, right? Most people don't have a relationship with their bank. They can't just walk into their local branch and the branch manager comes out and sees them, right? I tend to try and build relationships with my banks so I don't have this problem. Like I'm trying to open some stuff at the bank that I use, or one of the banks I use here in Australia, and the girl at the branch, I followed her. She moved branches, so I moved to keep doing my business through her, so she looks after me. You know, needed a form done, you know, so we found a way to do the form because I'm 200 kilometres away from where her branch is. So we got around their system and she worked out how to get around the system so she could keep me as a customer. That's why there is that. The other thing is it's a club, right? What you're trying to break into when you're using foundation, when you're using the tactics of the wealthy, it's a club and they don't want you part of it. The largest barrier to the club is the banking sector, right? And you need people on your side and it costs money, right? It costs money. You need people to advocate for it on your behalf, sometimes to break through the door and say, this guy's all right, he can be part of the club. So that's what it is. And that's why I've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars. I would hate to know how much money I've spent over the last 20 years flying around the world, meeting with lawyers, accountants, ministers, you know, going to private functions and dinners so I can get to talk to the right people, right? Because there is a cost to play. If you want to play this game properly, there is a cost to play. And it's just how the world works. You know, the Dutch East India Company, if you wanted to do business with them, you had to pay them, not they pay you. You know, you had to become part of their insurance pool. Same with the East India Company. You know, to get into the club, you have to pay. And that's just how it is. Seems unfair, but hey, that's why we've got to change the rules. But the current rules say that, you've got to pay to play. So just keep that in mind, that if you're having trouble, it could be because you don't have the right relationship, or you haven't been introduced by the right person, or you're at the wrong bank. It's as simple as that. So.
Yeah, the other thing too, and being someone who was involved in tax office for foundations myself for years, Stephen, and having set many up for clients, you've got to distinguish between private foundations are what I call the 80%. The public ones are for that 1% or 5%. So the private ones in Australia, it's kind of like the $2,000 job you can get from some hack who will tell you that no government's got jurisdiction over you and therefore you won't have to pay any taxes through it. Now, those things, the tax office, every time I've taken them on, have won easily because as soon as you tell the mafia you got no right to shoot my family, they're going to shoot your family. So whereas a public foundation, the government set up very broad requirements and an open door for you to basically get approved. And so if you go through the process and do it correctly and play the game, you get left alone. I mean, it's politically very incorrect to target public foundations, so they virtually never really do it. They just kind of every now and again have a little bit of a whinge or grizzle in the politics about the media, about churches and, other foundations. You don't pay much tax, but at the end of the day, you take on the church, you take on the Catholic Church, who owns most of Australia's real estate. So I got it on very good authority. If you actually look at the land holdings, nearly all major land of any value is owned either by the banks in Australia or by the Catholic Church. So,
or the government.
Or the government.
Australia is a really weird country because most of our land mass is not freehold.
Yeah.
And even the freehold, I would argue, is not freehold because you only own the top 6 inches of soil, right? And the amount of airspace above that land to actually occupy the building that you're in. You don't own the minerals underneath. You don't own the right of access underneath. You don't own the right of access above, right? So if you have a look at the deals that people do in places like America where you actually have true ownership of the land, you own the land and everything to the core of the earth, and above to the heavens, you get deals like what Donald Trump did over the Tiffany's building, where he bought the air rights and said, I'm going to put a massive, ugly building that's going to overhang your store. So the Tiffany owners ended up selling to him to get a store, and they got a better store because they got basically the entire one half of the ground floor space. So they got a better store out of him by doing the deal. These are the things that that we don't have. And that's why when people say to me, oh, why did you take the leasehold land? Well, is the government going to take away something it already owns? Of course it's not. Might squash the lease or might change the terms of the lease, but then I can take that to the High Court. You try and fight land claims, and at the moment, a lot of the land claims that have been going around, unless you're Indigenous and traditional owners, they're not winning anymore, especially when it's infrastructure related, because the government's got the right to take that land back off you, and that's freehold land.
Well, I mean, I can remember having been a former lawyer, as you know, and studying property law and all that. Remember, one of the most interesting things I learned, which I still find to this day very few Australians know, is that unless you've got a allodial title, you don't actually own the land. I mean, freehold just gives you possessory rights to the land in a feudalistic system. So as Australia, I said, you don't actually own it. And then if you go and look at land titles now, most of them got assigned from the Crown to corporations many years ago. So by and large now, the land is owned by offshore corporations, and then you just got a kind of freehold right, which gives you the impression that you own it when really you've just got a possessory right to the exclusion of all others. And then, of course, it's really not a lot different to leasing, really. So
exactly, and I'll take a lease any day because I've got direct negotiations with the leaseholder, which is the government. And once again, if you do that, and you've got great connections and you've got the right representation, you can get anything done you want. Right. But when you're outside the system and trying to fight it from the outside, you're going to get kicked in the ass.
Oh, it doesn't work, does it?
It doesn't work. So that's why sometimes you've got to fight from the inside, but at the end of the day, you've got to be able to stand on your own 2 feet as well. So.
Well, I always said in every system is a blind spot, and as Barack Obama once said, America's the greatest tax haven in the world if you live outside of it. And so you just got to know the blind spots. So Australia's got plenty of blind spots. In fact, Australia is a tax haven for foreign investors who are non-real estate. Australia works fantastically well. I mean, our foundations are very, very good, like our public foundations. I mean, I've set them up for clients and everyone in this state loves me for doing it. They work really, really well. The regulation is even less than America, like very, very minimal reporting requirements. Governments really do leave you alone over here with that one because they've got plenty of money. They can snaffle out of all of the middle-class people, the property owners of stamp duties, and slug the heck out of them. So they really buy and large leave foundations alone. And I remember once one of my friends basically was running a church, Steve, and he literally was giving his parishioners tax deductibility as a PBI, even though technically he wasn't, which... because so he was doing that, which he wasn't allowed to do. Yeah. He didn't realize it. And this is what happened to him. He eventually got looked at because someone found out about it years later. And they're very reluctant. He told me, the Charities Commissioner, ATO, audited it, and they kind of were very reluctant. And they ended up saying to him, look, they said, you can't keep doing this. So they said, we're going to remove your approval as tax deductibility for PBI for your food homeless shelter business thing they were doing, because he had two approved things, his church and he had his homeless thing.
Yeah.
But he said, if you basically come back to us and you've got two clear different constitutions, you show us you clearly separated your land out, then we'll reapprove you again. No issue. And then you just have to have a clearer separation. They never backdated him. They never audited him. They never punished him. They never did anything to him. They just said, yeah, we just can't let you do it moving forward. But if you fix it with your lawyers and come back in a few months' time, we'll fix it for you. And we had the ATO decline a foundation a few months ago. And the lady said, no, look, she said, rest assured, we'll approve it. You just got to make a couple of changes. That's their attitude.
Yeah, and their attitude is because you're doing what they can't do. Yeah. They're running out of money. And
when I worked for the ATO, Steve, I was specifically told by my bosses when I worked for a year and a half approving foundations for tax purposes, they said, our policy is to educate, not punish charities. So make sure that if you find a charity doesn't meet the requirements, you just got to have a call them, show them what to do and help them to do it. So I said, really? They said, yeah, you got to help them. So just, call them in, work it through with them and help them. We want to be seen as really good and, the politicians want us to kind of do that. So literally I was actually told that, make sure that, make sure that you really look after people. And we would have people come to us with all kinds of weird and wonderful things. And my boss would say, yep, just go and have a chat with them, show them how to improve it. And even though we didn't actually qualify, rather than disallow it, he goes, no, just go call them into the office and show them how to do it and teach them how to do their constitution properly. And then we'll make sure we get them approved. That's your attitude.
Yeah. And it still is today. It still is today.
Yeah, still today.
And same with overseas. When you start using overseas foundations and stuff like that, they're all the same. And they're looked on favourably.
Yeah.
And that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Well, so it's been an interesting chat today, really. So any further final thoughts, really, in terms of what steps people are going to wait now? Was it more just to wait and see with the election before we start making our moves, Steve?
No, look, if anyone who knows me, you should always be making moves to protect yourself. And I think that some of the easiest ways that people can make themselves and protect themselves is if you're a sole trader out there now, I would suggest having a look at making sure you're incorporated, right? Yes. There's different ways of being incorporated, but pretty much set up a company and start doing business for a company. Second thing is have a look at your ancestry. Can you get a second citizenship? 2, start having a look around. If shit hits the fan, is there somewhere you could go? Having a plan and having your escape into another jurisdiction is always good to have. The old Baden Powell thing, be prepared, right? Because we do not know what's going to happen. We can surmise what's going to happen. I work with guys that have very good predictive machines, and we sort of have a great understanding of sort of what the next 10 years looks like, and the next 10 years is just chaos. But the good thing with that is if you're attuned and you're protected, there is great opportunity out there. We are seeing the split of the world at the moment into the rising empire and the falling empire. And it's becoming very clear what those two empires are. So at some point in time, countries as well as people need to stand up and say which empire you want to be in. At the moment, just be aware that it's happening and that this is a natural cycle. But at some point in time, you're going to have to stand up and say, I'm convicted. This is my conviction that I'm all in on here. Yeah. Right. At the moment, if you the old saying, there's 2 sides where there isn't. There's always 3 sides. There's if you have a look at a coin, right? A coin has an edge. So at the moment, I'd be sitting on the edge, sitting on the fence of both sides, and just watching and seeing, and seeing how it plays out. Anyone that can actually say to you, this is definitely going to happen, this, that, and the other, man, it's going to be very, very dangerous to say that they know exactly what's going to happen. We can see from history what we think is going to happen, but we can't actually say this will happen for sure, because the biggest problem in everything is something called free will. What happens tomorrow if for some reason that, 60% of Australia wakes up with free will and goes, I've had enough? I'm not expecting that's going to happen, but it could. I wish, I pray and wish and hope that this is going to happen, but it could happen. That's what I mean. Free will could happen. But what we've got to do also is in small increments all the time. One of the greatest things, I think it was Jack Welch, had the 1% philosophy, where if you improved one thing by 1% every month, that's a 12% increase. If you did it every week, that's a 52% increase. If you did it every day, that's a 360% increase on that, whatever that thing is. Right? So that is why, right, if you just improved one thing in your life by 1% and did it every day, man, imagine the changes that we could make.
That's actually how we ran the Global Wealth Club, Steve, really. And what I've done the last few years, just small changes and just making sure each week you're getting something done, and you probably noticed that with us. And you look back now and we're amazed at what we've achieved over 2 years. And it's really just because we just did small steps. And in fact, I was telling someone the other day, literally, the Pilates instructor I train with has trained the Dockers players, many other elite athletes. I'm doing the same level of strength work that many of the elite athletes, I'm stronger than most of them now, like Dockers players. Now, if you told me 2.5 years ago that was possible, of course, I would have gone, yeah, whatever. But just by slow consistency, because she said to me, you're actually my most consistent client. She goes, many athletes come for a bit, then they get injured and take time out, or they get caught up with things and then they've got to go away on a long trip. Where she said, you just keep showing up every single time. You just don't stop showing up. So she said, you've actually passed nearly all my athletes, bar a couple now.
And it's like I'm a big reader. You can see the library behind me, and my iPad's full with Kindle books and that. But I always make sure every day I read a chapter, a page, or something, because it's improvement can be absorbed through other stuff. That's why I don't also watch bullshit TV. To me, if I'm going to watch TV, it's got to be informative. I've got to learn something from it that I didn't know before, and that's for me that's my improvement stuff. Like I can improve in my life a whole heap of places, health and fitness and all that's probably the biggest one. But we all have areas of our life that we're going to improve, and just being here is one of those. Just turning up and listening to me rant and rave and that sort of stuff. You might not agree with it, but it might spark something for you to go and do. And that's what I say. So have a look, people, of where your situation is and what's that one thing tomorrow that you can improve.
Yeah, I did that same thing, Steve, even when the whole thing was going on. I would just do little things like, I remember when I first started bringing in mandates, I'll admit I was nervous, even though I knew my rights. I just didn't like walking into places and standing out and things like that. And I remember one day thinking, well, whether I like it or not, I've got to push through my discomfort. And I even said this to my kids and to others. I said, let's just take small steps. Once I got very comfortable with that, I then started making things where I'd go to places I heard that were known to be Nazi to actually do that, Yeah. You cut out for a little bit there, Warren, but that's all right. We can improve that. I don't know how we improve 1% of the telecommunications. I'd love a 1% improvement in telecommunications right now. No, I would agree. Yeah. Look, I think we're done really, Steve. And before we end today, the Plan B event happening this weekend, of course, we're going to be speaking and all that kind of stuff. Like, what are you going to be sharing on again? Just to let everyone know.
So I'm doing 2 sessions and family offices and and the and citizenships and that sort of stuff. And then the other one is actually some practical stuff on where to find some information out there. So what I'll be leaning on people with is I'll be showing you some websites and some other information sites that I use to gather information when I'm looking around. So there'll be 2 sessions.
Well, I'll be sharing on 2.
Yeah,
I've got 5, Steve. God, I've got 5. I'm going to be speaking on. Yeah, introduction about Plan B. Why you should have a Plan B. I'll even be teaching about dodgy ways people try to scam you and the secrets of an ex-lawyer to not get scammed in finances or anything, which is going to be. But I'm going to be teaching some of my best stuffs on foundations, like Australian foundations. So teaching all my knowledge on that kind of stuff called Advanced Australian Foundations. I'll also be teaching some of the basics of building a residual income and a closing address as to where I feel things are going to be going. So there's going to be plenty of content, everyone. We've got Virgil speaking as well on silver bullion. We've got Connor speaking on cryptos and how to create income through staking. So if you haven't already registered and you're not, doing anything this weekend, or you'll find time afterwards to do it, make sure you register and, come along and start the journey and get yourself sovereign and give yourself a head start before the election.
100%. 100%. Just do one thing, people. Just do one thing.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Steve, and thanks, everyone. And we look forward to seeing you on the weekend.
Will do.
Bye for now.
See everyone on Saturday.
Thanks. Bye.
See you guys. Bye.